welcome. Thank you for being here. It's so good to see you again.
Hey, happy to see you too.
So you're new at Purple. You've been at Purple for
About a month.
Yeah. Okay. I want to kind of back up and start with your personal history. Where did you grow up? What is your personal journey, personal history? And then we'll move into kind of professional journey.
Awesome. So I grew up, I'm actually from Dominican Republic. So I was born there in 1993, Santo Domingo.
Okay.
And super amazing. And then I actually, like a lot of Dominicans, I moved to the Bronx in New York City. And that's actually my upbringing, which is really cool because it gave me an opportunity to still be really heavily into my culture.
Absolutely.
Which makes me really happy. So that being said, you know, I had a very, very different upbringing than the one that a lot of folks might experience, right? But it definitely shaped who I am today, right? Somebody that, you know, is not only a social entrepreneur, but that really focuses on making a difference for Black and brown people across the U.S. and the world. So, yeah, so that's kind of like a little bit about initially who I am.
Beautiful, beautiful. So you left the Bronx, obviously, and what
Yes.
kind of inspired your move?
Okay, inspired is an interesting word because I was not inspired. I had to move here because, well, okay, do you want the real answer or do you want the political answer? Because I have two.
Let's give both. Let's do real first, and
Okay.
then we'll do political after.
Okay, well, actually, I'll backtrack
Reverse
it.
that?
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
reverse it. So political answer, which is what I tell everybody, is that I decided to move here because I wanted to go to school, which is not a lie. I
Sure.
did want to go to college. Now, I needed to move here. This is a real answer. I needed to move here because I didn't have my papers. I was an undocumented immigrant. So my parents divorced when we moved to the United States. They actually separated. And my dad remarried my stepmom, who's freaking fantastic. She's such a warrior, and I'm so inspired by her. And she and my dad, you know, she really was like, hey, your kid is, you know, a junior in high school, and she should really get her papers. We need to, you know, so she can go to college. But the process is going to require her and her brother, my brother Jafet at the time was, he's 6 years younger than me, so he would have been like 10, for us to move to Utah and live with them. So that's actually why we moved, you know, so that we would be able to get our papers. Yeah.
Interesting.
So I could go to college.
So you could go to college. Exactly. So essentially, so you could go to college would be kind of in pursuit of opportunity, yes?
Yeah.
Opportunities to learn, grow, pursue a career. And so what did you find in that move? What did you find? What did opportunity look like in the modern workplace for you?
You know, I've been working since I was about 14 years old. So the work ethic of like, hey, hard work and like not being afraid to go clean floors or clean houses or like whatever. Like I didn't have a traditional like, hey, let's babysit. Like a lot of kids like get to babysit.
Yeah.
And I wish I would have had more of that because it would have been a lot easier. But I didn't get to do that, like I said, because we needed to put food on the table. So I did work a little bit. And that actually set up the stage for, you know, understanding how hard you need to work in order to, you know, be financially stable. So that's actually when I started working. And then when I got my papers, I was able to go to university and begin working. I actually joined, this was a while ago, 2013, I actually joined Organizing for Action. And so that was Obama's like, you know, kind of a administrative social agenda to ensure that people had an opportunity to make a difference and make some social changes within their own communities. And I worked on immigration reform. I worked on healthcare reform. Brilliant. And really focused on that political aspect, right? And I think that really set the stage because you have to work really hard when you're in politics. And then from there, it was like, hey, I want to lobby and I want to work with nonprofits. So I worked with the state government and multiple nonprofits across the state. I managed the SNAP program. for the state, which is really cool. I got to see so many families and kind of train them, right?
Sure.
So that they could, get access to those benefits. And then I started my company. So, did that. I've had a very non-traditional work life. I don't know.
I love it. Talk to us a little bit about the company you started.
Yeah. So, funky story. So forever, right? I've had this really big love or like a soft spot for education because it really did transform my life. And so I wanted to make sure that I found a way to give back to that.
Absolutely.
My dad has really probably since the 80s has been into computers. Like he was such a nerdy guy and was like seeing into the future when his parents were like, no, you should just do business. And he's like, I hate it. Ew, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'm going to try to find a way to follow in your footsteps. And I knew that technology was something that was missing in education. So we had a dream that one day I would start a school. So that's how that dream started. But Code and Color didn't come about until I met Leon from the Kindness Diaries.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you've ever watched it or if you haven't, you should watch it. I'm season 2, episode 3, The Gift of Purpose. But essentially,
watching that tonight.
Okay,
Yes.
you gotta watch it. So essentially, Leon's this guy. He shows up at my job and he's like, hey, I'm traveling from Alaska to Argentina, relying on the kindness of strangers for everything. And I'm like, what is everything? He's like, food, gas, like my stay, everything. And so essentially I said, okay, so what do you need from me, right? And he was like, can I stay in your house today? And so it was like 30 degrees outside. This was in 2018. It was like 30 degrees. I didn't want him to sleep in this old yellow buggy that looks so beat up, looked terrible. And he was like, the heater doesn't work. It's like him and his other friend with a camera. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, yeah, I'm an independent filmmaker. I just want to show the world that kindness exists. So I let him stay in my house. I shared my story with him, right? Part of my upbringing of being an undocumented immigrant meant that we faced homelessness, meant that we faced, an immense amount of hunger, meant that there were opportunities that we didn't have, meant that I saw my parents, I saw my mom crying over a kitchen counter because there was no food in the house, so she didn't know where how she was gonna feed her kids, right? So here he is presenting this to me. I'm like, no, I'm not allowing that to happen. So I told him he could stay at my house. And he came over to my house. He's like, actually, after hearing your story, I want to tell you something that because I didn't tell you the truth. I'm actually with a show called The Kindness Diaries on Netflix. And when I meet someone whose soul touches my heart in a profound way, like your story has, I give them a gift. So the first gift that I'm going to give you is I'm going to send you to whatever country you want to go to. So you could learn how to start your business, and you can also learn how to give back to the community. And he did that. I went to Costa Rica. I was out of the country for 3 months.
Beautiful.
It was awesome. And then the second one was, I'm going to help you start your company. So Netflix and BYU were amazing, BYU TV, and they partnered up to help us get started with the right network that we would need, professional services, marketing, finances, etc. So that's how Code and Color got started.
That's beautiful. So talk to us about what Code and Color does. What is the focus? What is the mission? What's the purpose?
Essentially, the mission is we understand that right now, by 2045, minorities in this country are going to be the majority, yet technology, which is leading the way, in every aspect of business, is only about 15% of the computing workforce is made up of Black and brown individuals. And we're here to transform that, right? The way that we do that is through a plethora of educational cohorts. So we provide young Black and brown adults with tech education for marketing, data analytics, and web development. And then we also connect them with scholarships for anything that has to do with programming. And then when they graduate from our program, we connect them to an actual internship or fellowship within these tech companies.
Beautiful.
We've seen those materialize into actual high-paying jobs, upwards of $65,000. So
Wow.
I'm excited because we really are showing people that, like, you know, Black and brown people are smart. You know, we also have a place in the tech force.
Yes.
And we are going to thrive. So
Yes.
that's our mission. And I am super excited because Silicon Slopes has been super supportive.
I love that. And I love the whole mission. Obviously, I am behind that 100%.
Right.
I love the fact that in 2045, the minorities in this country are going to become the majority. Yes.
Yes.
So why does that matter? Why is that important and impactful for this country and for as minorities, right? Why is that impactful? Why is that important? Why does it matter? Why is representation even an important topic?
Right. You know, the key here is understanding that everybody, first of all, you know, all politics aside, if we just look at it from a human standpoint, like, we get to sit in a table with every different person, and everyone is going to have an awesome story, and everyone's going to have their own new ideas that they get to bring to the table.
Absolutely.
And it's a new flavor, right? Like, it's maybe, you know, with any type of diversification, we get to actually experience what it's like to get into somebody else's mind. And they might have awesome new ideas that we never would have thought about. But those ideas are coming from, you know, their real life experiences, right? So I like to tell companies, like, think about, like, your product, right? Like, let's say you're selling a particular software and you think it's the best one for all types of local businesses. Well, having a diverse workforce is going to inform how you actually sell that product and how you communicate to those people so that they are able to buy your product. It just helps you, you know, but it also helps inform how you build it. You got to know how to build it so that, you know, so that it is accessible to all types of people. You got to build it so that, I mean, something like super interesting is like, hey, just make it bilingual. Like, you know, make it bilingual. Spanish is so huge and you might be missing out on a huge market, you know? So make it accessible to everybody. I think that's on the business side, that's a huge reason why that's important. On the personal side, like just a more human side, I think that I wholeheartedly believe that the world is better when we all get to be together and we all get to sit at a table and share things with one another, share our experiences, share our stories. I think the world would be so boring if we were all the same.
I agree.
So yeah, I just want everybody to feel like they can come to the table openly and be respected and be valued.
Let's dive into that a little bit. What value do people miss in their lives when they lack surrounding themselves with diverse cultures and people and thoughts and ideas? And then let's dive into what value do companies miss out on by not being diverse?
Yeah. Missing value is important because you're missing out on exploring the world from somebody else's lens, right? So think of it like being able to travel to a new country. So if I go to actually, I'll use this as an example. When I went to Costa Rica, I didn't know what it was like to exist in a country that put education first. And what that means for them is like, hey, yes, we have a police force, but we don't spend money on a military because we want education for all. We want to prioritize that. And they do that because they want to make sure that everyone that is there gets access to all the different things that they value. Like, they really value the tech force down there, which is huge. San Jose is like the mecca for technology in Latin America, which is awesome because you go there and then you go to Cartago, where I stayed, and you're like, I'm in a whole new country. It's awesome.
Interesting. Very cool.
But you see that, and values, everybody, what I'm trying to say is that everybody has different things that they find important, that they find essential to their everyday. And so for some people, it might be education, like for me, but for you, it might be like arts that's really important to you, you know? And I learned so much about arts that I didn't know just from being with you. So now I feel like it's almost like now you've become an extension of who I am just because I learned more about what you love. And I think that that's, to me, that's of high value. For business, it's essentially the same thing, right? Like whatever you're bringing to the table is going to make me not just smarter, not just be able to be more creative, but it's going to generate me more profit because what you have, I don't have. And now just by being with you or working with you, I can tap into that.
I love that. And I love how you phrase that. We become extensions of each other.
We do.
And when we surround ourselves with diverse people, the diversity in passions and in beliefs and in education become extensions of who we are and extensions of our business essentially, which I think is really, really powerful and really, really beautiful. So you've been at Purple for a few months now.
A month. Yeah.
A month. And you're the lead officer of diversity and inclusion.
Yes, I am.
Congratulations, first of all.
Thank
Brilliant.
you.
They could not have made a better hire.
Thank you. It's a big job. It's a global job. So I'm excited.
I'm excited for you. So as you move forward in your position, say you're building, let's use a little metaphor. You're building a house of diversity and inclusion. What do you use as the foundation?
The foundation for me is always auditing. And a lot of people don't like to think about like, you know, it's not glamorous. Yeah. Like it really isn't. But if you don't audit the company and say, you have to identify like, okay, what are the goals? Like, what are the things that we want to do? Like, what's going to be the game plan over the next 2 years, right? And when you do that, then you have to actively understand what is happening with the company. So, yeah, so we audit everything from what is the workforce currently made up of, you know, how many people are in leadership positions, how are we actively, you know, engaging with our internal customers, which are our employees, and our external customers, right? How are we, you know, what tactics are we using to ensure belonging? What does pay look like? You know, so all of those things we take under consideration, but we have to start there. That's the foundation auditing.
So as you go through these audits with Purple, what is your vision for diversity and inclusion at Purple?
The overall vision, and this is such a huge shout out to Allison Green, who's our culture specialist. You know, our motto at Purple is to bring comfort to everybody. And so our spin on that, right, internally when it comes to D&I is really like make sure that everybody is comfortable and feels like this is a space where they are able to be themselves. And we take that very seriously, you know? So what that means for us is, hey, we need to identify like what are the actual needs and what are the wants of people to make sure that they belong. And based on their answers, right? It's very democratic. Based on their answers, then we craft something that's going to be important to them. So our biggest goal is we know that equity is important across the board when it comes to pay, when it comes to leadership and talent development. So that's something that we've taken, you know, very seriously and we're prioritizing. And then we're prioritizing mentorship. You know, that's huge because we want people to be able to come into the company and be able to grow, but we also want the people who are currently within our company to have a pathway for them to thrive.
So let's dive into the mentorship side of things really quickly, because I think something that would be really helpful is for companies who have the desire and who are making an effort to increase their diversity and inclusion efforts, right? And to maximize on that. What steps should they be taking to hire first and also promote within the company as it comes to diversity and inclusion? And how does mentorship help with that? Where should they start?
So those are two. I'm going to break that up if you're okay with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hiring is very tricky, but also probably one of the first steps we can do to begin tackling that to increase diversity, right? Not so much the inclusion. The mentorship is going to bring the inclusion. So when it comes to diversity, right? The first thing that I've seen, and I've seen this with other companies that I've consulted. So the first thing is I ask companies, hey, where are you posting your jobs, right? And most of the time it's like, hey, Indeed and LinkedIn. And so I'm like, okay, well, you need to diversify that, right? Like you need to go where people are. So, a lot of people, you'd be surprised. A lot of people that come to Utah, they will go to, they'll come to the Black Chamber and they'll say, hey, I'm looking for work. Well, if we don't know, if the Black Chamber doesn't know like where to send people, and if the company doesn't know that the Black Chamber is doing that, then they're not going to be able to say, hey, Black Chamber, can you please post these jobs? Right. So then those people who are new to the state or who may be plugged in with those community organizations, they might not be able to, they might not know about that job.
Absolutely.
So that's where I start. I go to companies and I tell them, hey, get your recruiting team to diversify where they post their jobs. The second thing is, hey, you need to train your management or your hiring managers on, you need to define, first of all, the second thing is you need to define how you're hiring people. A lot of companies, they hire for cultural fit. We don't know what cultural fit is because it's not the same for every company.
Right.
So if you define it and you train every single one of your hiring managers to know how to do that, you're going to be way better off. And then the second part of your question was that
really quickly before we get to the second part, along the lines of hiring, if companies are not necessarily aware of these communities of where people gather, how do they find them? How do they find these communities?
I think that part of that is being able to have, you have to empower your employees. You have to constantly ask them, hey, what is happening in the community? Because more than likely there are employees that are very active in their communities, So you need to empower your employee base to share that information. And that might look like, whether that's somebody in the executive team who is leading that, is that somebody, within marketing and communications whose sole job, or even, people operations, whose sole job is to find these opportunities, source them, right? And then connect the company, get the company plugged in.
Sure.
I think that's the best way to do that. Or you can just, send out a survey. Say, hey, we want to know where our purple employees, in our case, what they like to do, who they like to work with. And by doing that, we get a better sense of what they like and how we can better support what they're doing outside of work.
Brilliant. Okay, moving on to the mentorship half of the question.
Okay. Mentorship, yes. So the way that you're able to promote people and increase that diversity, promote them from within, is essentially you have to start. It's baby steps. So we could do a lot of like unconscious bias training, which is really important. But I think that you need to ultimately create a plan to train every single manager on what it means to be inclusive. And it's kind of like, hey, here's a class on, here are the things that I think are going to help us be better, right?
Sure,
in our case at Purple is, here are the things that we believe are going to bring comfort and belonging for every single one of our employees and makes them feel safe, right? Makes them feel like this is an amazing place to be. So we want to invest in them, by connecting them to the resources that we have. Mentorship is, we're be building different levels, right? And so part of those levels is, specifically learning how to become a manager and how to become an entrepreneur. Because what we want is for people to be able to not just say, hey, I learned the skills to like lead other people, but also we want them to have the skills to be founders within the company and come up with ideas that can lead the company in a whole new direction. So that's what mentorship looks like for us.
I love that you mentioned teaching what inclusion really is, right? And what inclusion means. So what would be your definition of inclusion if you were sitting down with someone?
Inclusion, honestly, for me, is finding a way to, and this sounds so cliche when I say it out loud. Finding a way to get everybody to sit at the table, and then even if people disagree with one another, they can still find a common ground.
I love that. And it's so funny because it sounds so simple, and like you said, it sounds so cliche, but it happens to be such a problem, and it happens to be so difficult for a lot of companies and a lot of people. So along those lines, how do you go about promoting diversity and inclusion to those who disagree or are uninterested in having those conversations?
Part of that is that it's, hey, tell me more, right? You have to talk with people and ask them. Well, first of all, I don't believe in going into a room and telling people like, hey, here are my things that I think you should be doing. And like, because, hey, they might have an entirely different idea of what's going on, and I might not know that. Yeah. So I like to go into it with, hey, here's a topic. What are your thoughts? And like, that way we can level the playing field. Like, I know where you're coming from, and I can, now I can understand, okay, why do you see things the way that you see them? If I can't see them the way that you do, I can't reach your heart. I don't believe in attacks. I believe in those common stories. So when we talk about, just something as simple as like, hey, pay increase, and we want minorities, to be paid more. So let's take the wage difference, right? The gender wage gap. When I talk with men, we have a real conversation, and we talk about stories that they've heard about women and their struggles in the workplace. I can see sometimes why they might believe that a woman might not need to be paid as much money.
Sure.
But I also see it from, okay, but I also understand the culture that you're coming from and why you have been taught those things.
Right.
Though if I don't know those things, like if I don't know what cultural or social influences have made them come to those decisions, then I ask them, tell me more. And more often than not, usually in that conversation, we end up agreeing on one thing, okay? I usually go, okay, well, the conversation usually goes, well, in our culture, most men are the ones that actually, lead the household, and a lot of the women stay at home. So therefore, they need to be paid more to be able to, sustain their households. And the moment that I introduce, hey, what if there was a single parent? I don't even say woman, like, tell me more about the single parent scenario. If it was a single man, tell me about that. And when I flip it to, hey, well, now it's a single mother, automatically they're like, oh, you know what? I didn't think about that.
Right.
And so like, and then like openly, like it just opens the conversation up. I don't know what it is about that, like probably part of our culture, but like it automatically opens it up like, oh, hey, I didn't think about that. And so now it's like, well, listen, don't you think that like they should be able to sustain their families just as much as a man? Oh, well, yeah, maybe. That
makes sense.
So I think like, but I didn't attack. You see that? Like,
yes,
it's just, hey, let's just talk about it. Like, here are some examples of other people around you. And it's just helpful to do it that way.
I love that. So as you encourage company cultures to be inclusive, and as you blaze the trails leading so many efforts, what is one of the biggest hurdles that you see for the modern workplace to actually becoming inclusive?
The biggest challenge is probably over the last decade is, trying to strike a balance and making sure that things don't get politicized, right? Look, the personal is going to be political regardless, right? And when we think about what does that mean, right? Is that there are, like I said before, there are a bunch of different social and cultural norms and structures that are going to that create who we are.
Yeah.
and create what we value, what we hold dear. And that is going to cause some rift whenever we come across people who might not have the same beliefs. You know, over the last decade, we've been seeing a lot of more contention and also a lot more anxiety when talking about, you know, what are the differences that people have.
Yeah.
So that is pretty challenging. But I think that the conversation that we need to be having is, hey, these things don't need to be contentious, right? Like, we can still have an open and honest dialogue, but, you know, try to be level-headed, I think, in a way. Otherwise, I think that when we get too upset or things get too political, that's where we don't end up finding that common ground.
Sure. And I think something that may be helpful is if you could kind of give us an example of the difference between an inclusive culture and an exclusive culture, because what I think might be happening as well is there's companies who don't necessarily realize that the culture they've built in their company is not inclusive and why it's not inclusive. Can you speak a little to that?
Yeah. An inclusive culture well, do you want like a Utah example? Do you want everybody?
Let's do everybody. Let's
do
everybody outside of Utah.
Perfect. So here's the thing. And a lot of my experience is within tech and nonprofit or government work. Nonprofit and government work, tons of women. Tech and nonprofit and government work is usually lower pay. Tech, higher pay, mostly male dominated. Okay? So in an ideal world, in an inclusive environment, that would be 50-50 on all of those, you know, nonprofits. Just speaking purely gender, nonprofits would be 50-50, government would be 50-50, tech would be 50-50. The reason that's not happening is because there has been, you know, since the beginning of some of these tech companies, there has been a big, I hate to say it, but there is a boys club that has been established.
Sure.
And that was established not out of malice, but because people were hiring the people they went to school with, you know?
Right.
It's, hey, my guy, my buddy, you know, he graduated in computer science just like me. He needs a job here. And, well, I don't know many women in the computing work, you know, that studied computer science at my school.
Sure.
So who am I going to look for, right? And it's been like that all the time. We've been hiring. I mentioned culture fit earlier, right? Like, we are still hiring in the workplace. We are still hiring people who look like us, feel like us, and give us a good feeling, instead of the people with the right skills and the right determination to make this workplace a better place. So that's what makes it exclusive, right? If you hire people that just look like you, if you're just thinking about people that's your friend, then you're never going to grow and you're never going to expand.
I think, again, speaks to the importance of surrounding yourself with people different than you in your personal life as well.
Absolutely.
Because it really does reflect over and translate over into the workplace.
Absolutely. I've gotten to a point where I heard about this. Here, this is what I will say. A lot of people, their group is very small. They have the same friends they grew up with. There's nothing wrong with that, because you need that circle of people that you can be like, hey, I can be my full real self with you. You know what I mean? I don't have to pretend here. I'm speaking not about that circle, but the one that's a little bit wider, the one that includes like former colleagues or like people that you see all the time, you interact with, but it's more in a professional setting. If that circle always looks the same, you're never going to grow. You're never going to learn new things. And furthermore, if you get stuck I tell people this, if you get stuck in a bound where, you know, like, let's say you lose your job if you only know people that have a job and nobody's looking for anything, and they might not all, and you all do the same thing, and you want to do a whole new shift in your career, if everyone does the same thing, no one's going to be able to tell you of a new job opportunity.
Right.
No one's going to be able to help you break into a new circle.
Right.
So I now have gotten to the point where it's like, hey, I'll meet somebody, and there might be an opportunity that's cool, but it's not for me.
Right.
But the circle is getting big enough for me to be like, but I know somebody else that would need that, regardless of race, gender, or anything of the like.
Okay, Karen, so you were almost pushed into a new culture. And I, in many ways, was robbed of much of my culture until I was 17 and was introduced to Black culture and met my first Black mentor. And that was a really groundbreaking time for me in my life. So what would be the first step for employees, leaders, and people to venture outside of their culture, and what would be the benefit of doing so?
Awesome question. I love that. Okay, so best way to venture out is try to expand your network while at work, right? So, when you're in a work environment, it's much like being in school. You get an opportunity to have so many people around you that you wouldn't have otherwise met. So I usually like to encourage people to find those folks who are chilling by themselves in the cafeteria, or like always at their desk and not really interacting with other people. Or if you are that person that is very shy, then go out and say, you know what? I'm going to burst my bubble today, and I'm going to go and I'm going to meet somebody new.
Sure.
And it might be intimidating, but at first, right? But I think that after a while, it's a very welcoming and warm experience. And so I like to encourage people to do that.
Brilliant.
The second thing that I say is, so that, that's at work. Then another really great way to get to know people and get to know new cultures is by trying their food.
Amen.
Like
Yes.
go to a new spot. I love food, first of all. So I just like to tell people, like, hey, you just learned something, find a new restaurant and ask for the restaurant owner. Tell them to tell you their story. Tell them to tell you like why they started their restaurant. What this food, what is the dish? Where does it come from?
Yeah.
And if you don't feel comfortable having too much of a conversation, or if they're too busy, take it back at home and Google it. Google it, learn new things, see where you can find new people that also love going there, because more often than not, the Google reviews are going to help you find more people that also like that place.
Google reviews. Okay, I want to kind of switch tracks just a little. As a leader in an established global organization with so many different expressions and different voices, what does it even look like to engage diversity and inclusion as well as reconciliation as a whole?
At a global scale, to engage any type of diversity, inclusion, belonging work, any type of equity work, it's all about identifying what needs are needed at every single office, every single location. So for us at Purple, that means that we take care of every single location here in Utah has different needs, and we try to find ways to meet those, right? Same goes for California, Texas, Georgia, and anywhere else where we do business, right? And so a huge part of that is asking our employees, what are the biggest hurdles that you are experiencing within the workplace? How can we address those to bring you comfort and to ensure that you feel like you fit and you're able to grow here? Not so much because we just want to eliminate attrition, or, we want to make sure that like we retain employees, but because we really do actually believe, and I love this about our executive team, we all really truly believe that everybody should have a seat at the table. And so we also know that at some point we're going to leave, and we want people to be able to grow into those positions rather than us having to hire out. So for us, that's essentially what that looks like. That's how we reconcile the the gaps and try to get rid of them, I guess.
I want to dive into racial reconciliation, and reconciliation stems from a Latin word meaning to bring together again. And my question is, if the goal isn't just to restore connection but also create it, what then? Because together again implies that we were once together to begin with, right? But if we're dealing with an issue where there's two societies where one was being oppressed by another and we weren't necessarily together in the beginning, where do we start now?
Yeah. This is a very empirical question, right? Because reconciliation also alludes to the fact that we were, like you said, we were together at some point, but we as a society only have so much data that we can pull to in a lot of the historical, collection of anything that we have, whether that's just politics or whether that's, economic, show that we were not out together, right?
Yeah.
That there was one group that was oppressed and then another one that was thriving, whether that's a caste system or purely racial, right?
Sure.
But let's talk about race. Race is a very difficult topic because the United States history is rooted in racial oppression. We can't forget that slavery did happen, that those things were not fruitful for anybody. And we also can't erase the fact that because of slavery, the remnants of that, the remnants of Jim Crow, the remnants of other different events like the war on drugs and, bills to incarcerate people, continue to play an outstandingly huge role in how the society, our society, interacts with Black and brown individuals.
Sure.
And so reconciliation, we can't reconcile because we don't have something to, to tie that. What it does give us an opportunity to do, though, is actually imagine what it would be like for every single person to be treated with respect. It does give us an opportunity to say, hey, maybe we're not talking about like, how can I make sure that like I just completely, because I don't care for erasure, and I don't think that, I can't speak for all Black people, but I don't think that Black people are asking to erase the history, erase what happened. I hear the conversation going towards, hey, we know these things occurred. Now we're asking for equity. Here are the things that you need to do, right? We need to address the pay gap in the workforce, right? We need to address hair, okay?
Absolutely.
And not just Black women hair, Black men too. We need to address that those things are still carry biases, that affect how people are treated, and whether a person or not is, whether a person is fired or not. So there are a plethora of different things that we could be addressing in the workforce that I think that are like that I think will bring togetherness and ensure that people feel like they've come to an equitable spot. I don't think that, I think that's how we achieve it. But we have to get innovative, and we have to address it with kindness and empathy for one another to be able to get there.
Absolutely. And I love that you said we have to get innovative. And I know you have said in the past a phrase, innovate in power.
Oh, man. Wow.
Can you speak to
Where'd
innovate?
You grab that from? Did you grab it from my Instagram? What's going on?
Oh, girl, we go deep in our research.
It's on my website, though, I think. Yeah.
That's probably where. Can you speak a little bit to that phrase specifically, innovate in power, what it means to you and why it's so important?
So our Code and Color team, we thought about what we want for the future. And when we're thinking about, like I said, we want everybody to be equal. And we thought about a big important movement that we had in our, historical movement back in the 70s and 80s that really focused on bringing Black and brown people the power to be their best selves. And be able to thrive in our communities and be able to lead in our communities. So when we're talking about innovation, and particularly for us in the tech sphere, in the tech sector, we focus on, making sure that people are empowered to be creative, but also people are able to lead within these organizations. We want them to be, for all intents and purposes, powerful within these companies. And that is going to require a shift in power, or in a leveled playing field, so that Black and brown people are able to be elevated, not just bring great ideas that are powerful ideas that make money for other people, but also that make generational wealth for their families. So that's where that phrase stems from. It's like
I love that.
Double entendre thing with some historical contracts.
I love that. And what a great way to start building leaders and creating room for Black and brown leaders. And I kind of want to speak to that as we're both women of color sitting in this room. What can women of color be doing to lead the charge in creating a world and a workplace that embraces diversity?
We're already doing it. I think this is a very exciting time to be a Black woman, to be a Latin woman, to be an Asian woman, a South Asian woman, to be a Native American woman. I think women of color, especially Black women, have always been at the forefront of a lot of these movements. And particularly right now with the diversity and inclusion conversation, we are at the forefront, not just advising, companies or building employee resource groups or building business groups to elevate our communities, but we are also building the webinars and the trainings to help a lot of the companies and a lot of our communities become more educated. And I say we continue to do that. I want us to continue to do it. I know that it's very hard because the plight of the plight of the Black woman in this country, it is hard. It almost feels like, hey, you have to carry a burden on your shoulder to lead every single movement, but it is also a voice that is heard, and a voice that right now, and throughout time has been able to bring about the most change, So I can't forget when we talk about like the suffragette movement, we often talk about, or we often forget that Black women played an important role in that. And so when I think about that, that also plays, that's inclusion, that's inclusion. That's the right to vote. And today we get to do it by saying, hey, we have the right to be leaders in companies. We have the right to establish generational wealth. And we are going to create every tactic. So build D&I strategies for companies. Establish yourself in the marketing teams and the data analytics teams and the engineering teams. Like, infiltrate the spaces and then show everyone that you can to be a leader in the space.
I love that. And I think so much of that speaks to investing in ourselves and standing up for ourselves. And I would love to hear about a time when you specifically had to stand up for your own authenticity, diversity, and brilliance in your life or in the workplace.
I've been very blessed. I don't think that I've had a lot of those experiences. But I can share one. So, there was a time in which I did have a job and I didn't feel like I was valued, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was leading a lot of the different charges when it came to rebuilding culture to ensure that we did get rid of what I said earlier was the big old white boys club, right?
Yes.
And so we, a huge part of this re-education, I was like, I'm going to take it upon myself to be able to help us do this. And I did. And I mean, we had executives that were very happy about it. And then there were other people that didn't like me and that didn't want to see me grow and succeed. And so, hey, I took a leap of faith and I said, I'm quitting, I'm leaving, because at some point you have to recognize your value and you have to tell yourself, I know, number one, I'm worth a lot more, just purely respect.
Yeah.
And number two, I am worth a lot more money than what I am getting paid. So sometimes you have to really bet on yourself where you don't feel valued. You have to say, I'm willing to let that go. Go put 100, this is very New Yorker, but to keep it a buck, you have to spend some type of anything, whatever you would be willing to give up for anybody else, whatever you would be able to or willing to sacrifice for anybody else, you need to be able to do that for yourself. And you need to take a leap of faith on yourself. You need to trust yourself that you can do it. So I did that. And then here we are at, one of the best companies in the United States, leading a global team.
Yeah.
And hard work really showed that. But I think that's like the biggest time in which I've seen myself not be valued, but then found value in myself, communicated that value, and was able to elevate myself.
What a beautiful success story. What a beautiful success story. Karen, thank you so much.
Thank you
for being here, for sharing with us, for educating us. I'm grateful to you, honored to be in the room with you.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here with you.
Thank you very much.